Judy, can you hear us? Okay, we'll go ahead and start the meeting, the April 10th, 2023 Town of Ithaca Board meeting. Welcome. And we'll start by saying the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice. We'll start with persons to be heard. Paulette, do you know if there's anyone on Zoom who would like to address the board?
I do not see anyone on Zoom, nor have I received an email.
Okay. And so Cynthia Brock from City Council is here, Ithaca City Council, to give us an update. So Cynthia, thank you for being with us this evening. And she just does she have to hold the micro, or can
Nope.
she?
Just turn that box on, that other
You
one,
don't need, and then you don't need to hold the mic.
and speak like you want to be heard.
Speak like I want to be heard. Okay, great. Hi, everybody. Thank you for having me. Rod and Rich comes by and sees us at City Council periodically, so I'm happy to come by and give some brief updates of things that have been going on in the city of Ithaca. At our April meeting, we have passed and adopted the long-awaited Reimagining Public Safety Report. As you recall, in 2021, the city and the county adopted 19 recommendations for reimagining public safety, 17 of which are conducted through joint city-county efforts. They are being brought forward by the Community Justice Center. And the city has adopted the last two, primarily having to do with a reconvening of how we're looking at public safety in the city, as well as providing supports for our community police board. So what the plan has set forward is we will be hiring a deputy city manager to oversee the police department. This person actually has authority granted to them on behalf of the city manager. So this person will oversee the police department, coordinate with intermunicipal organizations, nonprofit organizations with regards to public safety, will oversee a co-response team and initiate a pilot program with the Ithaca Police Department to evaluate what, if any, call types can be responded to by non-law enforcement personnel. So that was a momentous event. It represents a huge investment in our community, in our police department, and allows us to move forward collaboratively across all spectrums. We also authorized matching funds for the Transportation Network Project. This was a grant program that will allow the city to have a long-term analysis of our pedestrian and bicycle infrastructure. How can we create interconnection with neighboring municipalities in terms of our bike and sidewalk networks? The city has been developing a draft policy on how do we address homelessness. We are working with and right now receiving feedback from county departments, city department heads, as well as outreach workers. And we hope to be able to bring that draft policy forward to the public for their input in coming weeks. With regards to joint city-town efforts, we also authorized the amendment to the contract for the Camden Group. This is the arrangement that we have to address staffing shortages at our intermunicipally owned wastewater treatment facility. So Camden Group has come in and provided not only staff to be the chief operator of the plant as required under our speedies permit, but also to fill in gaps in our staffing right now. There's probably other things that I could go into, but I'll stop there.
I think there's a Green New Deal community advisory group being formed. Do you know anything about that?
Yes, as you know that during COVID, we suspended our commissions and advisory groups. We are now reinitiating those groups, starting with our sustainability commission. The appointments for that commission were just done last week. So I'm going to project that it will probably take a month or so for that group to start meeting and coming together.
There questions for Cynthia?
Great, well, this was fun.
Thank
I
you
will,
for coming.
I will make it a regular thing, and so happy to be here. Thank you.
Thank you.
We're still at persons to be heard. Did you want to address the board on? Okay. And no one else has joined. Okay. We'll move on then. The first item is a public hearing regarding a local law amending Town of Ithaca Code, Chapter 250, titled Vehicles and Traffic by adding one yield sign at the Calkins Road Inlet Valley Drive intersection. I'll open the public hearing at 5:36. But I do not believe you're not here to speak about that issue, are you? Okay, and I don't see anyone on Zoom here. So we'll leave the public hearing open for a minute. Would someone like to move the resolution? Rich and Margaret seconds. Comments, questions? Pretty straightforward. And it's a very short resolution. Okay, I'll close the public hearing at 5:37. All those in favor, raise your hand or say aye.
Aye.
Unanimous. Next is a resolution regarding recognition of Yvonne Fogarty's dedicated years of service. She has been on the Zoning Board of Appeals for 11 years. And we'll be stepping down, and we already have, there's a new person who's coming on. Right, she's on the planning board.
Yeah.
Did she start?
She started on the.
She started on the zoning board, yeah. I'm not gonna read the whereas, because this is gonna happen at the planning board meeting in a couple of weeks. But it's in the, later this week, I guess. Next. Okay.
They're just gonna present it to her.
Okay.
What would have been
So
made.
would someone like to move the resolution recognizing Yvonne?
I'll move it.
I'll second.
Bill seconds. I doubt there's any questions or comments. Unless anyone wants to say something about Yvonne that she might go back and listen to afterwards. We're ready to vote. All those in favor, raise your hand to say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Unanimous. Next is acceptance of dedication of public sanitary sewer and potable water infrastructure associated with the 8-lot subdivision at Mecklenburg Road. There's an addition to the second whereas that's on your computers, but I'll just tell you what got added to that second whereas. And by that same resolution, approved water and sewer easements from Eco Village at Ithaca to the town of Ithaca, which easements were fully executed and recorded in the Tompkins County Clerk's Office on August 18th, 2022. So the planning board granted preliminary and final subdivision approval for this back in April of 2022. The applicants request the town of Ithaca accept the dedication of the public sanitary sewer and water. Portions of the infrastructure were installed outside of the filed easements, and revisions to the easements are necessary to ensure adequate rights of access and maintenance. And this resolution includes approval of the revised easements by Director of Engineering and attorney for the town. Would someone like to move the resolution?
Move that.
Rich, is there a second? Rob seconds. And Dan is here if there's any questions. So questions, comments? Rich?
I don't have a Dan question, but I do have a general question. We typically don't embed easement approvals and resolutions of this nature? Is this this something we sort of decided was kosher and something we're going to do to streamline process going forward?
Well, I'll see if Susan wants to answer that. My guess is it was so integrated. Well, Susan, go ahead.
The town board previously approved the easements last year. They were signed and recorded. And then when the town received the as-built drawings, they saw that some of the construction occurred outside the easement areas. So we have to file amended easements that enlarge the easement areas. And so this is all being done with one resolution. I don't think it's just a very different situation we've had before. I don't think it really sets any policy. If you'd rather see them done separately, that's fine.
No, I think that now that you made that distinction, it makes perfect sense. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? If not, all those in favor, raise your hand or say aye.
Aye.
Unanimous. Moving on to authorization to execute NICEAG easement and agreement for electrical service upgrades associated with the Ridgecrest Road Water Improvement Project. So it was back in March of 2022 that we determined it to be in the public interest to establish the town of Ithaca Ridgecrest Road Water Improvement. And whereas the proposed upgraded electrical service and transformer are associated appurtenances that are required for the improvement, whereas NICEAG will own and maintain the transformer and requires an easement to install, maintain, and access the transformer. This resolution authorizes town supervisor to execute the NICEAG easement and agreement with NICEAG with final approval of the director of engineering and attorney for the town. Would someone like to move the resolution?
I'll move.
Bill, is there a second? I'll second. Questions, comments? Again, Dan is here if there's. Seeing none, we're ready to vote. All those in favor, raise your hand or say aye.
Aye.
It's unanimous. Number 7, there's a memo from Mike Smith explaining the ag conservation easements to explore this for the Dennis Scott McCourtney at 282 Hates Road and Julia P. Holmes at Hates Sheffield Bundy Roads. You have maps showing where the property is. You have the application form. So would someone like to move the resolution authorizing us to proceed with getting the ag easements using Northeast Appraisals and Management Company at a cost not to exceed $7,800?
I'll move that.
Rich, is there a second?
Second.
Margaret, the questions, comments? And this did go before the planning committee as well. So, yes, Bill.
I assuming that there's some state grants we'd be getting or trying to get to purchase these.
If we decide to move forward, I mean, the first step is just for us to see what the prices are of the easements. But yes, Mike, I believe that there are still grants available to support such ag easements, correct?
There are. The state ones from Ag and Markets are usually on even years, so it wouldn't be till next spring that they're out. So we'd have to look to see how competitive these two would be if we did decide to go that way.
Other questions or comments? It's been a while. Mike, remind me, when was the last ag easement that we approved?
The last one I think was around 2018, and it was the property up on Bostwick Road, the Malin property.
Thank you. Questions, comments? All those in favor, raise your hand or say aye.
Aye.
Unanimous. Would someone like to move the consent agenda? Eric, is there a second? Sam? All those in favor, raise your hand or say aye.
Aye.
Unanimous?
Wow, is this gonna be the shortest meeting ever?
No, no, not necessarily. Necessarily. So we're going to just quickly mention the correspondence, which is the liquor license 30-day waiver. There was a slight amendment, Paulette.
Smiley's made a mistake on their application, so they had to file it again on your desktops, but you didn't have any concerns last time. Need to know if you have any concerns. And Smiley's is the new dandy up on 96.
Dandy Mark.
Yeah.
Rogan's.
Rogan.
Or Rogan
It
Brothers.
used to be Rogan.
Any concerns?
Okay, thank you.
Report of officials, board members, staff. Marty, would you like to mention something?
Yes. I'd like to report back to the board that the Ithaca Energy Code amendments have been approved by the state of New York. Obviously in conjunction with the city as well, because that's our partnership that has occurred. But just for formal notification, they have sent us those items back.
Any questions about that? Just mentioned that this is the year that we want to do a joint retreat that would include management team, department heads in this board. So probably fall we'll be looking at, and I just want to get a quick read whether Friday might be possible. Probably talking about a half-day meeting. So with advance notice, might board members be able to do a Friday instead of taking a Saturday? I think Erica was most concerned about you.
Yeah, Friday's my best day. I try not to schedule meetings.
Okay. So, and Rob, I don't know, do you
Yeah,
have
it
some
sounds-
flexibility?
Sounds reasonable.
So we'll start looking at dates in the fall. Seems like it's a long ways away, but the months go by very quickly. So anyway, we're planning on a joint retreat between department heads and town board members. I also just want to see who might be available. So remember, we're doing the May 6th event at Tudelo Park. Just need a few volunteers to help with a variety of things. I think I've heard from one or two of you. So just let me know if you might be available to help on May 6th. If you can't do it the entire 4 hours, just let me know, just send me an email. So I might just reach out to some of you, but I think that
Is the time slot?
it's 11 to 3, but it can be portions of that as well.
I'm available.
Rod, am I one of your two? You've got me.
Okay. But anyone else, just let me know. Okay, thank you very much. Judy wanted me to mention, so staff have the availability to order shirts. And so they're in the process of ordering them right now. We want to see if any town board members want a shirt that can be embroidered with the town of Ithaca logo. If so, we'll send you the link. I think you pay, but we haven't really figured that out yet, whether we'll cover the cost. So are some of you interested? If some of you are interested, I'll just send out the link and then we'll figure out how to move forward if you want one.
Yeah, I've got that bright green one from the parade. But I can-
There's quite a
maybe
few
something
options.
else.
It's kind of overwhelming to go through the pages and pages. So we'll send everyone the link. I think the order though, well, I think that happens a couple times a year. Is that right? The shirts, or is it really just once a year?
I think here
And-
it's the orders due.
Okay, so that gives you a little bit of time. I'll
In
send
the
out.
email is Excel spreadsheet.
Okay, so we'll see who might want. And as I said, there's quite a few options out there. I think we're getting close to closing on the Courtright property. I emailed Guy this morning. He's just waiting for the Gray Haven folks to do something, but I think it's fairly minor. So we're fairly close. I'm hoping it closes, maybe even this week. But he knows we do need days notice just to write out a check. The board already approved basically up to an amount that we don't need to go over. So we don't need to come back to the board to get the check issued. But I think Donna would like at least a day's notice. So stay tuned on that. And Guy is still working on an MOU related to one of our streetlight LED. So we're hoping that that will be resolved soon. So stay tuned on that. One of the things that was interesting is I was approached by, it's called Battalions TV. And Rich actually, I think, got on the website once to look at what they've produced.
Italian.
Battalions, yes. So you can look it up while we're talking here. They wanted to know if the town of Ithaca was interested in them coming in and videotaping some of our key amenities and interviewing some folks. I was somewhat intrigued. So I actually had a conversation with them because, you know, normally it's the city. And in fact, I emailed them and I said, I think you mean the city, right? You want to work with the city? They said, no, you want to work with the town of Ithaca. I'm like, okay. And I talked to the Chamber of Commerce to see if they might, how they felt about this. You know, they didn't really give me a conclusive answer. There is a cost involved, which gives me pause, but it's fairly reasonable. It's $3,400. So I might just send out the information. And if you want to look at it and give me a reaction, whether it's something to consider or not. I was only intrigued because usually the town doesn't get approached for things like this. Right? There are a number of things when I talk to them that I started to identify that are pretty unique to the town. Some of the museums that are in the town, certainly the Dalai Lama's Learning Center, monastery. So look for it. I'll send it out tomorrow. If you have thoughts, maybe we'll pass on it this year, but maybe be interested in another year. Any other updates before we talk about our draft solar law revisions that we want to make and get some, so tell you our approach to that. So any other general updates? If not, I'm going to turn it, yes.
I would just say, our new sustainability planner, Hillary Swartwood, started today, and we're really excited to have her on board.
Yeah, we're having a number of people start now and next week, I believe, from engineering perspective. So Judy has been busy. Thank you, Judy. So I'll turn it over to Rich and CJ if you want to talk about some of the approach now to a revised solar law.
And I'll turn it over to CJ.
Okay.
I met with CJ today, and there's no point in both of us summarizing what one of us could do, especially the person who has the map.
Sure, absolutely. And of course, feel free to jump in at any point. But overall, my understanding of the policy goals are to permit large scale solar, but to limit it significantly, largely to community solar. To meet goals of the comprehensive plan and the Green New Deal, of course, and add provisions for agrivoltaics. So that's the combination of essentially solar energy facilities and farming. Shorthand. So at this point, the draft includes revising large-scale solar facilities to a maximum of 35 acres, which is approximately the size of the top end of most community solar projects. So those run to about 5 megawatts. The heuristic on solar is approximately 6 to 7 acres per megawatt of energy generation. So thanks to our unbelievable team who have awesome ArcGIS online layers. Mike Smith made some really nice maps based on some feedback and comments from a conversation with Rich and Susan last week. And so we have a couple maps to show you some of at least our preliminary thinking on a solar overlay. So this overlay would allow, and let's just go to the suitability first so you can see how we've begun to think about this process relative to town lands. And so it's a little bit of a spaghetti here, just the phase 3 lines, that's pulling directly from NICEAG's distributed lines. So those are local energy production. And we can turn those off, and then you can see what remains are the bulk transmission lines. So those lines carry electrons long distances. You typically see those. The ones most visible are at the King Road substation, as well as just over the town line in the town of Danby. You've probably seen that large corridor there. So we overlaid these and Mike and I went through this map just today, and to do some really basic analysis on suitability. And we looked at parcels both in the ag zone as well as in low density residential. We excluded all parcels in the conservation zone. We excluded most parcels in the Inlet Valley overlay district. And we're certainly happy to talk more about that, but there are a couple parcels still touching that did meet the criteria. And these were located about half a mile from the distribution lines and had these minimum acreages.
So
for
just so
each
you know,
respective zone.
CJ, we're not
Yes. Oh.
seeing what you're seeing.
Have to do a new share. Okay.
There we go.
Okay, oh, sorry about that. The first one was the suitability, that's from ArcGIS Online. This is essentially would be the proposed overlay, and if we certainly, this is not meant to be a final version. We're still thinking through and would like to discuss with you the potential for further limiting based on the existing water tank zones and water system zones that are currently delineated by engineering. Just thinking through the siting of, for instance, a residential or commercial development, not wanting that to compete with large scale solar projects. But since Mike has such extensive experience in the town and mapping experience, he was able to go through this mostly even at a glance and recognize parcels that were either completely wooded or had agriculture or conservation easements that were known or planned preserve lands as well. And also identify areas that were kind of shrubby and had invasives as well, could actually stand a little cleanup. So at the end, we came to these particular parcels in the town that would be at least on this first pass and to be suitable for a solar, large scale solar overlay zoning districts. And that's more or less the highlights, but happy to answer any questions you might have about the local law process and the general thinking on it as well.
Yeah, so this really is a different approach than where we had been headed, because
We had sized our, we had created project size limits strictly based on underlying zones. So low density residential was limited to 10 acres or less. Ag zone was 35 acres or less. And then what, through conversation with CJ, became clear that some parcels are just better suited for solar development than others. And I had an initial concern that large LDR parcels could be subdivided. Parcels larger than 10 acres could be subdivided, and there could be a number of contiguous projects that in the aggregate would exceed our size limit, but individually would comply with the law. And so, and then CJ kind of said, well, what's wrong with that if they're sited properly, if they're conducive to solar development, and yet, you know, we limit the development to proximity to bulk transmission lines or distribution lines. So that this is kind of a product of that conversation. You can see that when you take all that into consideration and back out the parcels that Mike identified as well, it doesn't look like there are a lot of areas of the town, but there are sufficient acreage to, I think, I don't know if we've done the math there yet, but there's sufficient acreage to get us a long way toward our Green New Deal goals.
And CJ, I think you're starting to hear from more solar companies. I know we've been hearing from a couple consistently, but I think there's even more in the mix now, correct?
Yeah, there's certainly interest in developing in the town, and of course, we want to make sure those are in appropriate locations and the highest quality proposals we can do.
And I think the goal for tonight was just to get a reaction whether this seems like a good approach, because we have an ambitious timeline. Maybe just review what our aspirational timeline might be. Sorry.
No problem.
And Susan, did you want to say anything while we're looking to open up the timeline?
Okay, seeing nothing, I don't think Susan was saying anything. So we would intend to review the initial draft with you at the April 24th meeting, so the next meeting. And then set the public hearing potentially for May 8th at that meeting. We then intend to refer that draft local law, the solar local law, to planning board for their review and anticipated recommendation on May 2nd. Then hold the public hearing May 8th and consider a determination of environmental significance of seeker, and then consider adoption on Monday, May 22nd.
And Susan, did that still seem all possible to you?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. So again, we just wanted to get your read whether this seems like a reasonable approach. Questions, comments?
I have a question. Is the map subject to change based on future modifications to distribution and or bulk transmission lines?
Yes, it certainly can. In fact, that's one of the reasons why we want to make sure we have continuous conversations with NYSEG about any planned expansions. My understanding is at this point, and then we have further information on that, but that they intend to largely harden the existing infrastructure, so upgrades to the existing utility infrastructure rather than continuing to expand into new areas, either by bulk transmission or the local.
Thank
But
you.
Rich, if you, if the town adopts this overlay, I assume the overlay will be on those identified parcels. CJ, is that what you were contemplating?
Yes, that's correct.
So then the town would just need to amend its local law to amend the map to include or exclude certain parcels from the overlay.
Thanks.
So questions, comments? Everybody, I assume that means you're supportive of this
I
approach?
just had one small question.
Oh.
Just, could we see to the south of the map? It looked like there were some parcels that
Oh,
weren't
yes.
fully showing. I'm just-
Oh, absolutely. Yes, there.
Did you hear Margaret?
Okay, we'll zoom out a little bit.
Margaret was just asking about the southern portion of the town. Is that what you're asking, Margaret?
Yes, we'll just zoom out so it all fits on the page there.
All right, thank you.
Absolutely. Yes, and I believe that the total currently is selected. Now, some of the parcels are split zoned, but it doesn't show this on this map as it is because we still have to clip down to the areas that would be within the LDR zone themselves. So approximately as it stands right now, this is somewhere between 1,200 and 1,500 acres total in the town. Now, if that translates, we're not sure of the exact translation into megawatts yet, but we intend to take a look at the greenhouse gas emissions inventory for the town as well to see what percentage of the town's needs this possibly could cover as well.
Great.
Great, taking into consideration that not all this is going to be developed either by landowner choice or economics. Can you just discuss briefly the Cornell parcels that are also?
Oh, yes. So I did leave a message with Cornell Sustainability to ask them about, I don't know if you, my cursor
We
there,
can.
yes. As you all may know, most of this area here that you see that I'm encircling is currently zone low density residential. So that's all of Cornell's University's campus here. And there's some parcels here. Those are obviously pretty extensive holdings. I think that's in the hundreds of acres. And so just a conversation with Cornell about their potential intentions, as well as I reached out to them as well to see if there were any intentions relative to large scale or utility scale solar properties.
So just otherwise, if they weren't institutional properties, they would fit the criteria to be identified as parcels on this map. It's just that they've been pulled out because they have potentially have plans of their own that need to be addressed.
It's certainly possible, and with the institutional partners, certainly helpful to know what the intentions are for in Hugo Medical, IC, and Cornell University relative to their utility planning, which I know they do independently with the utility.
Did you say you reached out, but you haven't heard back?
That's correct.
Yeah.
Just today, so just
Okay.
after this map. Instant.
Margaret, did you have any other
No, that's great. Thank you.
questions? So it sounds like there's a green light to keep moving in the direction. So it was I know it was a long meeting that Susan, Rich, and CJ had to figure some of this out. So thank you for getting us started on this. So anything else about that? Do we have any other topics? Yeah, this is going to be a short meeting. Do we have any other topics that we need to talk about tonight? Okay, then we'll adjourn at 6:07. Thank you, everyone.